As I am in my undisclosed location and bunker somewhere in Kentucky, people are listening to this around the world. That still just amazes me. Let's get to it. Welcome. Another wonderful episode of IBF On Demand. I'm your culturally diverse and culturally complex host, Eric Wilson. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thanks for the follows and subscribes. Find me on LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you get this podcast. I want to thank Arkiva, driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. Thank you very much, Arkiva. I mentioned this a couple months ago, about 4 podcasts ago. I'm kind of bringing it back to your attention. I am working on a new project, a brand new book. I came out with my book last year, Practical Guide for Sales and Operations Planning, S&OP, IBP. This year, I'm working on a new book, really the cultural complexities in a global S&OP process. And if you haven't guessed, a few of the podcasts, I talked about global S&OP. Probably in a few podcasts coming up, I'll probably talk about culture. Not today, but in other ones. But that's really going to be the focus of it, is cultural complexities in global S&OP process. And kind of the concept of the way you look at decision-making, collaboration, consensus mean different things subtly, but importantly in different cultures. And we need to understand to be able to understand our own biases, but also have empathy for the way others so we can build bigger and better global processes. That's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. So why am I mentioning this? Not because, I'm still a few months away from this book. It's because this book's going to be based on a lot of observational research, interviews. I also have a whole new set of surveys and research I need your help with. So please, go to my LinkedIn page, Wilson Demand or Eric Wilson Supply Chain. You're going to find me on LinkedIn if we're already not connected. Go to my LinkedIn page, and I should have most likely tagged as importance or something. I'm going to have a post there. Check out that post with the most recent survey I need you to help me with. There's only 11 questions, real simple, takes 5 minutes to do at most. Go through those. I need your feedback because that is critical to understanding really those differences between cultures and where you fall in. It's a great survey, and it's interesting going through it too. It can kind of see where you fall on different process, collaboration, decisions, things of that sort. So please check that out. I could use your help. But today we're going to talk a little bit different. There's actually more to it. In global environment, S&OP is no longer just about balancing supply and demand. It's about aligning multiple regional teams, priorities, and constraints. Challenges include, obviously, different cultures. I'm writing a whole book on it, so obviously that's important. But also time zone differences, making real-time collaboration sometimes difficult. Varying market dynamics where demand fluctuations across regions differ. And regulatory and compliance requirements, forcing supply chain and businesses really to adapt to plans locally. So in that, today's guest has a lot of success. Christopher is the Director of Sales and Operations Planning at Precor. It's a global leadership position in planning and supply chain for almost 15 years now. Current responsibilities are demand planning, master production scheduling, supply planning for all finished goods, and customer service products. He's got a lot of background in global and regional S&OP processes, and we're going to talk a little bit about blending those two together today. Let's bring on Christopher. So welcome, Christopher. I'm excited to have you on.
Excited to be here.
I know we talked about this since last October, getting you on and doing some things, and I'm glad we finally able to make it happen. Even if it is, 7 months later, I'm glad it's still something we could do.
Yeah, it's my great pleasure to be here. I always like to talk with you.
Yeah. And I know you're helping me out with the book. You're giving me some great insights on the book. You got great perspectives globally on global S&OP processes. And since I'm all about global S&OP processes with a couple different podcasts, I wanted to extend that in and bring you in and really talk about what you've seen as far as global S&OP processes and local ones and regional ones and kind of get your perspective. So thank you for joining me.
It's my great pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah. Well, starting off that then, what do you see as really the biggest challenges companies face when trying to implement really a global S&OP process? I mean, for the longest time, S&OP was really regionalized way back in the 1900s. Now they're global processes. What's the biggest challenges you see from going from a regional to global S&OP?
Yeah, some of the biggest challenges are, well, the obvious ones, time zones. I wake up in the morning and have conversations with Europe because I'm in Pacific Standard Time, and after Europe is ending their day, then I'm, having conversations with North America on both coasts, and then at the end of my day here in Washington State, I'm talking with Japan and China. So trying to get a global S&OP meeting for consensus where you have each region in the same call is actually difficult because of time zones. We also have language barriers. Now, that might be subtle because a lot of our people that we're dealing with in a business realm are speaking English, but their interpretation of English words might be different than we would put on them. And that kind of leads to the worldviews and cultural differences that really play a huge role in the interpretation of communication. There's org structures, specifically matrix org structures, that can be very challenging because you have differing goals and objectives, um, or even diverging business goals where somebody else just doesn't have interest because it's not at the forefront of what they want to achieve. Obvious as it comes up a lot are incompatible business systems. You may have one region on one ERP system and one in another, or you have computer systems in different languages. I don't know if you've ever received a spreadsheet in Chinese or Japanese, but it's kind of difficult to interpret. I've received one in German. That was fascinating. Um, so there's lots of dynamics that come into play that are real challenging. Another one that happens is when you've got different regions that are using different vehicles. So you have a distribution partner in one place that has to do their own marketing, and another where it's a direct to market. So you have your own staff that you can interact with. So those different types of distribution models, especially when they're mixed models, can become very difficult to manage S&OP across multiple models. And even more than that, you can end up with different business licenses. So you have a business license in the UK and in Germany for tax reasons, and you have another one in China or Japan or Australia, and they might even be publicly traded, so they have limitations on what they can communicate to both internal and external partners. Integrating those outputs in trying to get the finance systems to talk to each other can be very difficult.
Wow. So there's a lot of different challenges we hear there going on. So, is there a big difference between the multi-international company, the truly global company that operates everywhere, and more of the regional focused company that may operate everywhere, but they really a lot of more decentralized type of operations and sales? So the centralized versus decentralized, basically, is there a big difference between the multi-international centralized and the regionally focused decentralized? Different ways global S&OP plays out in those.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty common, at least in the last couple of companies I've worked on. They've had regional focus, but those regional focuses still have time zone differences. Now, if you just have one region, period, so say you're a company that's North America based, well, then you don't have to worry about, trying to collaborate with people who are 8 hours or 10 hours or 12 hours different in time. Less barriers, cultural barriers are less likely. Now, yes, maybe you talk to somebody in the South and they might talk, with an accent, but not as big of a deal. English is English in those in those realms. And travel is cheaper. If you want to go and meet with somebody in person, it's pretty likely your computer systems are going to be able to be networked in the same, continent. They're going to be able to talk to each other much easier, much more likely, not always, but much more likely to be involved in a single set of books. So that collaboration is much better. And even then, you're also less likely, if you're a regional business, to get involved in a matrix organization where you have different thought leaders who simply have diverging goals. Regional businesses are oftentimes immune, or at least less likely to have a lot of the global challenges that we face.
So
And
you
another
mentioned
dimension
times.
that you actually mentioned this morning on a YouTube short was where companies offer different products based off what region they're in. So, on a global basis, you might have derivatives of products, whether it be a voltage. So I've got a 240-volt product in Europe or Asia and a 120-volt product here. Different compliance requirements definitely play into account. And then you might have different part numbers for, so your commercial invoices and customs data is correct. So you may have different country of origin declarations because you have localized supply chains. There are lots of complexities that come into play with global companies that regional companies just don't have to face.
Yeah, you mentioned that time zone thing a couple times. How many 4 a.m. calls or 7 p.m. calls have you done then? And you're
When I see an invite that comes across at 2 a.m. my time, I have to look at it and go, really? Really? Do we have to do this at 2 a.m.? But I mean, it happens. And fortunately, it's not as bad as it used to be. I've done 100,000 air miles in 3 months. Uh, and had direct reports in London and Boston and Seattle and in China and Japan, and just going from office to office to office, office.
yeah,
It's very hard on the body and the mind. You can, there's a surprising amount of work that you can get done when you're working in person, but
yes,
it's very difficult to be stretched across those regions and to manage. And there's a lot of times when you have those cultural barriers, you send emails and even have conference calls, and you think you're getting progress. And then when you sit down in person, you find out, oh, yes, well, yeah, there was a bunch of gaps that we didn't really know about before.
yeah.
So,
Well, to that point, you mentioned. I mean, how do you see cultural dynamics really impacting the effectiveness of a business S&OP type process? I mean, cultural dynamics play a big role in that. Then,
you know, it's funny. I think people get so hyper focused on AI, whether it's out of fear or whether they're trying to buy or sell software. They think if they have the latest tools, they can operate better. And frankly, I think that cultural dynamics represent the single biggest challenge to overcoming global supply chain demand and supply planning challenges. People are focused, I think, on the wrong things. They get focused on software and having the latest fancy thing, and that really doesn't solve most of the problems. I think most of the problems in communication and collaboration rest in people, meeting people where they are, understanding how to get them towards common goals. Yeah, you need the tools, but a lot of times, well, in history, when we had successful S&OP collaboration, we did it without those things. So
yeah,
yeah, so what do those some of those gaps look like? You have people who are process focused versus results oriented type people. You have relational people who want to make sure they're good and are elbow to elbow tied up before they go into battle versus others who just want to battle a task. They just want to get something done. There's people who want to, communicate directly, where others who don't want to have that type of confrontational style. They want indirect communication. Some people, I actually was involved in a conversation where some people said that others, specifically, I think men more than women, but I don't really know, aren't able to really process well when someone's talking. So they have to receive the information, and whether direct or indirect, they can't process and respond effectively until they have silence or time on their own. Um, And one of the things that I don't know if it's come up in your book, but there are unintended consequences from poor choice of humor. You go in, you try to tell a joke, and you get in another culture and find that what you just said is not as funny as you thought it is, and maybe it means something else. That can happen. I could tell a story about that one. Unfortunately, it wasn't my error, but I witnessed it, and it was interesting. Um, another, and as I'm kind of rattling through these quite quickly, but another impact of cultural dynamics is simply the pace of work. Go and try to be hurried on the beach in Hawaii or in a place that has a culture of trying to take time to do things right, versus other cultures that just want to go fast and get an 80% answer because that's close enough. Um, Try to put those two types of people together, and they will clash pretty quickly.
Yeah. There's a lot in there, and we're gonna continue to look at a lot of those things throughout the next few months with different podcasts as well. You mentioned the technology. You said we used to do this without technology. I mean, back in the 1900s. I always make that joke now. And by the way, most of my jokes aren't funny in any culture. It doesn't matter. But technology is still an important part. Data is an important part of integration, technology integration. That was one of the challenges you mentioned up front. And often there's roadblocks when it comes to a global S&OP process. How do we start breaking down some of those roadblocks when there's 15 different ERP systems, or data isn't the same, even language or same structure? How do we start breaking down some of those global silos, regional silos when it comes to data and technology?
Yeah, I mean, we have to find ways to aggregate data in a meaningful manner that is sort of standardized. So we talk about revenue. Okay, can we get to a revenue number? I realize your ERP can't talk to my ERP. Fine. Can we at least create, you have to define the outcomes that are required in order to have a conversation. So is it a revenue equivalent? Are you talking about gross profit, gross margin? What periods? So there are some that deal on a 4-4-5, 4 week, 4 week, 5 week calendar versus a fiscal year calendar versus a calendar. You have to get the systems so that when they create an output, if they can't talk to each other, we can compare outputs and see, are we on the same page? So I think starting at the top, and sometimes it can be just creating the expectations or having conversations about what does it look like, what are the necessary things that we need out of it, and then you build it from the top down. I love bottoms up forecasting, but typically consensus doesn't happen from the bottoms up. A lot of times it happens from the top down. So the challenges, like you said, in mixed ERP systems, inconsistent or incompatible regional business intelligence. You have somebody on Tableau, somebody else on something else. We face that in the company I work in now. We have SAP's business objects in one region. We have Power BI in another region. We have nothing in another region. So we have to build some basic tools that really get to something that we can have a conversation about that's common. We have um, a real problem here with profit and loss statements, where we have regional profit and loss statements and cost centers and general ledgers that are isolated, they're siloed. So we can compare P&Ls from different regions. Um, we can compare revenue totals, but the fact that the technology and data integration are not there, that's okay, because it's not required for the conversation to happen. Um, yes, we also struggle with master data gaps. There's three main pillars there that we find. One is governance. So, making sure we get the right data in the right places, or we have gaps that are covered. Data integrity, is it reliable and is it consistent? These things we need to work on, but without master data governance, integrity, and consistency, you can have systems that can talk to each other, but they're not speaking the same language, because of lack of consistency. Anyway, and beyond that, on something we also face, CRM software. You got Salesforce one place, but
Yeah.
something else somewhere else. So trying to understand opportunities, sales opportunities, growth opportunities. What does the pipeline look like? Um, we can't integrate those because they're different by region. So we just have to have a way to teach the regions how to go through and have consensus meetings, pre-consensus meetings, and review their sales opportunities, regardless of which software they're using. We just have to get them to understand the fundamentals of how to analyze their demand. Um, Beyond that, also there's PLM, PDM. We also have WMS problems where you have a WMS one place and not another place.
Yeah.
3PL integrations, so goods issues and goods receipts. We have non-standard ways that our invoicing is happening. So one invoices X works or different Incoterms. I know I'm like on a roll, but the point is there's so many different things that change by regions that we can't get caught up in, oh, well, this group invoices off the back dock, whereas somebody else invoices, delivered duty paid. Okay, well, we need to figure out how we can bring that all together and have a meaningful conversation at a level that makes sense.
So
So
sounds like even if it's ones and zeros, we're still finding a common language is what we end up
yeah,
doing.
yeah.
So what would, based on, we all have our pitfalls and mistakes other people can learn from. I got scars I can show people as well. What are some common organizational mistakes you see to avoid in implementing a global S&OP process?
Uh, the first most common, uh, the first most common mistake I see is people just think they don't need it. They're like, we're good. We're going to be fine. Or that consensus planning just doesn't add value. Just do what the boss says. Just listen to whatever he says. Um, and sometimes that works, but a lot of times you miss a perspective or something that comes. You don't understand something that's happening in a region, or there's something moving that you didn't catch. So that's a common problem. Is just um, my old boss used to call it pressing the "I believe" button. Like, I believe that's right. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just going to move forward. Yes, I believe. Um, and another thing is that leadership is it's a common misconception that leadership is aligned, or even internally we have alignment without having a conversation. If you've ever done a exhaustive process mapping exercise, you get in a room, everybody thinks they're aligned, and they get in the room and find out, oh, we weren't actually aligned. So I
Yeah.
think there's an assumption that consensus isn't needed and alignment is present when it's not. Um, Another common mistake people think about in S&OP is that your S&OP maturity is based off how many charts and graphs you have, which is not the case. Yes, leadership can get enough. They can get overwhelmed quickly, and they have short attention span, um, because they have a lot on their minds. They have a lot of
Hmm.
information coming in, and it's easy to lose them in a sea of graphs and charts.
Okay.
Um, Other common mistakes, that everybody's speaking the same language or interprets words the same way.
Yeah.
Um, that everybody's coming in with the same belief systems or values. Um, that everybody has the same bias. I think that's probably really common
Yeah. People
as
have
a
different objectives then
misconception.
as well. Yeah.
That's right. It's yeah. Another misconception that's common is that quantitative planning methods are the only methods worth using.
Yeah.
Right? We must just use the numbers. And granted, yes, data driven. We should be data driven and not just planning from emotion. But being able to document assumptions based models and do what if scenarios is is pretty important. So
Okay, we only have
yeah,
time for one more quick question here before we wrap up. So you got about 30 seconds with this question, but it's an important one to kind of leave people with. Is we went through the challenges, went through the benefits, went through the struggles, all those things. Talked about cultural dynamics. We're going to talk more about that going forward. I'll probably have you back on and talk more about that. But for the company getting started, what's that first step they need to do then to really start going from a regional S&OP to a global S&OP? What's that first step they need to take?
schedule it. Like you
There you go.
you just You force it. You go, I know I'm not ready. Start small, get it on the calendar, get in for the most important discussions and expand from there. Create alignment on your common goals so that you know this is what we have to achieve. And then you get scrappy. You just figure it out. And don't get bogged down in systems and documenting processes that take forever. Be relentless and committed to that consensus.
I love that, and I know I only said 30 seconds, but you just opened up a can of worms. I at least gotta pull a couple of the worms out. You realize that's a very Pacific Northwest answer, a fail fast type of tech, philosophy. Jump in, do it, learn from our mistakes, and build a better process. Trial and error. That's a very Pacific Northwest type of response. Now, someone maybe in Central Europe and other cultures, they'd be like, no, we need to plan this out before we come to a conclusion. That way, we make sure we do the process best first. It's a different philosophy. You just stepped into two different cultural approaches of what that first step should be. Just saying.
Well, and my point could be schedule it, but schedule the process documentation.
Okay.
Schedule goes.
That would work for Central Europe and other cultures. That would work. Yes.
I just know that a lot of times people, when they're struggling to start, they don't do it. They don't get to the meeting because they're always trying to create the building blocks first.
Right. Yes. No, I get that. It was just funny because you gave the typical tech Pacific Northwest answer. I loved it. So, all righty. Well, thank you very much. We only a little bit over, but it's worth it. It was great conversation. I said I most likely will have you back on. I love talking with you about this, and I think you're going to have a lot to contribute as we go through this topic in the future.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you. So when you look at global S&OP, there's a lot to it. I mean, one thing, you're looking at global S&OP structures. I did a podcast on it. I said a couple months ago, go back and check out the differences between regional and global S&OPs. But besides that, Lori, what you want to do is create a global governance structure with clear roles and responsibilities. The more we define the roles and responsibilities regionally, locally, globally, across a business process like S&OP, the better it's going to be. Establish a core principles that guide all regions while allowing for localized flexibility. You really have to balance that localization and globalization. There is a balance there based on whether sales, operational efficiencies, both sides, you need to balance both. Use data-driven decisions. Ensuring all teams work off the same information. Having that visibility of data across regions is important. And really driving to data-driven decisions really impacts how you're going to come and take some bias and different regional biases out of it. Invest in technology. I always go back to this for everything I talk about. Technology is playing more and more of a role. Here, when we're looking at data, the latency of data, accuracy of data, visibility of data, technology is going to play a key role. When you look at and being able to automate routine tasks, technology is going to play a key role. When it looks at being able to plan in a multi-echelon inventory or across multi dimensions and different types of inputs, obviously technology is going to play a key role. Invest in collaborative type technology and technology that's going to take you forward. And then prioritize a cultural intelligence in leadership, ensuring that you not only understand your own biases, but have empathy for other people, culture, and the way they approach collaboration, transparency, and things of that as well. Well, that's a wrap. I'm going to go do some Duolingo and learn another language. My name is Eric. You can find me at eric@ibf.org. That's eric@ibf.org. Thank you, Arkiva, for driving business transformation by solving what others cannot. I'm going to be a lot of different places come this summer, so check them all out at ibf.org. We're going to be in Chicago in June. We're going to be in Orlando in October. We're going to be in Amsterdam in November. We truly are worldwide. And there's going to be a few others we're going to fit in there as well, Nashville and some other international events. So please check out ibf.org or follow me on LinkedIn. Find out. And remember, as I said, when you're on LinkedIn, go to my site. Check out my page. I've pinned a certain post that has a survey. Check that out because I want you to participate in that survey. I am working on a new project, new book, Cultural Complexities, and I need your input on a brand new survey. So please check that out as well. And remember, no matter what language you say it in, don't forget, Lavaras sos mas.